I didn't plan on staying in Maine longer than a weekend. It was supposed to be simple. Drive north, disappear into the woods for a few days, clear my head, and come back to my normal life like nothing had changed. That was the idea I kept repeating to myself while I packed the car in the early morning. Half awake, running on coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that makes you believe isolation is a cure for everything. The truth is, I wasn't trying to find peace. I was trying to stop thinking. After the job fell apart, after the apartment got too quiet, after even messages from friends started feeling like obligations instead of connections, I kept getting this strange urge to go somewhere where nothing expected anything from me. Maine felt like that kind of place, empty enough to disappear into, but not so empty it felt unnatural. At least that's what I told myself. The drive north was long enough that the world slowly started shedding itself. Cities became towns. Towns became stretches of road with nothing but trees pressing in from both sides, like they were watching the cars pass. The radio faded in and out, until I gave up trying to keep it on. After a while, even the idea of music felt intrusive. I stopped at a small gas station somewhere north of Bangor. The kind of place that feels older than the road it sits on. One pump worked properly, the other made a noise like it was tired. Inside, the cashier barely looked up when I paid for fuel and a bottle of water. It was there I first heard about the trail. Not from a sign, not from a brochure, just a conversation I wasn't supposed to be part of. Two men were standing near the coffee machine, talking in low voices. I wasn't trying to listen, but the place was too quiet for anything to stay private. They mentioned a logging road about 40 miles north, said it wasn't on any official map anymore, but people still found it if they knew where to turn. One of them laughed and said most people didn't come back talking about the hike itself. They said there were rules. That word stuck in my head more than anything else. Rules don't belong in forests. Forests are supposed to be the opposite of rules. Wild, unpredictable, indifferent. So hearing that word in that context felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately explain. I didn't ask questions. I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I left the gas station, got back in the car, and told myself I hadn't heard anything worth remembering. But I remembered anyway. The turnoff came later than I expected. Just a narrow break between trees, with a faded strip of gravel pretending to be a road. No sign, no marker. Just the feeling that if you drove past it, you'd never notice anything unusual at all. I almost did drive past it. That hesitation lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then I turned anyway. The road narrowed quickly. The trees closed in like they were narrowing the world behind me. Every mile forward felt less like travel and more like permission I hadn't fully understood I was giving. My phone lost signal somewhere around the fourth bend. Not gradually, just gone, like someone had cut it out of reality. I remember looking at the screen longer than I should have, waiting for it to come back, even though I already knew it wouldn't. That's when I noticed the first blue mark on a tree. A clean rectangle of paint. Too fresh for how deep we were supposed to be in the woods. I slowed down without thinking. Another mark appeared a few dozen meters later, then another. It wasn't a trail yet, not officially, but it was becoming one. I parked where the road widened slightly, just enough space for a single car to pull off without falling into the ditch. There were no other vehicles, no sign that anyone else had been here recently. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. The forest here didn't feel empty. It felt arranged. Like something had been set in place and left untouched for too long, waiting for someone to disturb it. I grabbed my backpack, stepped out, and immediately noticed how quiet it was. Not normal quiet. The kind of quiet that removes distance. Like sound had stopped traveling properly. That's when I saw the sign. It was partially hidden behind a tree, old wood wrapped in bark that had started to grow around it. Like the forest had been slowly trying to take it back. Only the top half was readable. Loon Tooth Trail, 8.4 miles round trip. Below it, the wood was carved over. Not written, carved deeply enough that the grooves were still visible despite the age. At first I thought it was vandalism. Then I got closer. The carvings weren't random. They were numbered, and they were instructions. 1. Follow only blue markers. If you see another color, turn back immediately. 2. If you see the same tree twice, do not acknowledge it. 3. Count your steps. If the number changes, stop walking and wait until it returns. 4. Never speak to anyone who is not part of your group from the beginning. 5. If you hear footsteps behind you matching your pace exactly, do not stop walking. I remember reading that last one twice. Something about it made my body react before my mind did. A slight tightening in my chest, like my instincts had already decided this was not something to continue reading casually. Behind the sign, deeper into the trees, I could already see the first blue marker, waiting, like it had been there the whole time. And for a moment, just a moment, I considered leaving, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped past the edge of the road, and the forest accepted me immediately. The moment I stepped past the sign, the forest changed in a way I didn't notice immediately. At first, it was subtle, almost easy to ignore, the kind of change your brain refuses to label because labeling it would mean admitting something was wrong. The blue marker on the first tree was clean, fresh paint, perfect rectangle, too perfect for something supposedly forgotten. I followed it. The ground was soft underfoot, damp in a way that suggested recent rain, even though the sky above was clear. The trees were tall, dense, and arranged with almost unnatural consistency, like someone had spaced them too evenly without intending to. I told myself that was just pattern recognition, doing what it always does in unfamiliar environments. Still, I started counting my steps. Not because I believed the rule, because I didn't trust myself not to start believing it later. 100 steps in, I noticed the silence again. Not absence of sound, but absence of variation. My footsteps sounded identical each time they hit the ground. Even the crunch of leaves seemed uniform, like the forest was repeating the same sound back at me. At around 300 steps, I saw the second anomaly. A tree directly ahead of me had a marking I recognized, a blue rectangle. But I had just passed it less than a minute ago. I stopped walking, looked back. The tree behind me also had a blue marker. I blinked slowly, waiting for my brain to resolve the contradiction. It didn't. Instead, I did what most people do when reality becomes slightly unstable. I rationalized it. Maybe the trail looped. Maybe I had turned without noticing. Maybe the forest was denser than it looked, and I had misjudged distance. I kept walking. That was mistake number 1. The deeper I went, the more consistent the markers became. Every tree, every bend, every subtle shift in terrain felt like it had been prepared in advance. Not built, not constructed, maintained. Like someone walked through here often enough to keep it alive. I checked my phone again out of habit. Still no signal. But now the battery percentage had changed. It had dropped by exactly 1%. I stared at it longer than I should have. That's when I heard the first sound behind me. Footsteps. Not random, not distant, matching mine. Perfectly. I stopped. The forest did not stop. The footsteps continued for 2 more seconds, then stopped as well. I turned around slowly. Nothing was there. Just trees, blue markers, stillness. I laughed once under my breath, because the alternative felt too immediate, too sharp. Okay, I said quietly, even though no one was there. Not funny. Then I kept walking faster than before. The trail responded by becoming more defined. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like confirmation that I was no longer choosing direction. At around what I later realized must have been an hour in, I reached a small clearing. There was a fallen log in the center, and carved into it, fresh enough that the wood still looked pale beneath the cuts, were more rules. New ones, different handwriting. 1. Do not trust distance. It will adjust itself. 2. If you feel like you have been here before, you have. Do not stop. 3. If you are alone, you are not. I stepped back immediately. My foot caught on something behind me. A root, or something that felt like a root. When I turned around, I realized something important. The trail behind me was gone. Not hidden. Gone. The trees had closed in slightly, as if the space I had just walked through had been rewritten into something else. I walked forward again quickly, heart rate rising now, trying to convince myself this was just disorientation. But disorientation doesn't erase geography. It distorts it. This was something else. The blue markers continued, but now they were closer together. Like the forest was trying to reassure me. I was still on a path, while subtly making that path smaller. After another stretch of walking, I noticed something that made my pace slow again. The footsteps behind me returned. Same rhythm, same timing, but now slightly delayed, like whoever or whatever was following had adjusted to stay just far enough behind to remain noticeable. I didn't look back. Rule 5 came into my mind uninvited. If you hear footsteps behind you matching your pace exactly, do not stop walking. I started walking faster instead. The footsteps matched, so I ran. The forest did not resist. It adapted. The footsteps kept pace, always just behind me, never closer, never further, just there. And that was somehow worse, because it meant I wasn't being chased. I was being followed correctly, like I was part of a system that had already accounted for my movement. Eventually, I reached a second clearing, and this one had something different. A signpost, fresh wood, new carvings, and at the top, a number, 1. Below it, if you are reading this, you are already inside the loop. The sign with the number 1 stayed behind me longer than it should have. Not physically, I kept moving forward, but mentally, it didn't leave. It felt like something had been inserted into my awareness that refused to fade, like my mind had accepted a new rule without my permission. If you are reading this, you are already inside the loop. I told myself that was metaphorical, a psychological trick, a scare tactic left by hikers, something designed to mess with people already primed to feel isolated. But the forest didn't feel like it cared about my interpretation. The deeper I went, the more the trail stopped behaving like a path and started behaving like a process, a sequence, a system executing steps. The blue markers were still there, but now they were arranged with mathematical consistency. Equal spacing, equal height. Even their paint looked uniform, as if the same hand had applied every single one in a single continuous action that never stopped. That's when I noticed the repetition again. The same tree appeared ahead of me. Not similar, the same. A split birch with a long diagonal scar running through its trunk. I had passed it earlier. I was certain of it. I remembered the exact angle of the break, the way the bark curled inward like an old wound refusing to close. I stopped walking, looked back, saw another identical tree behind me. My breath slowed without me telling it to. This time, I didn't rationalize it immediately. I waited, because something in me wanted to see if it would resolve itself. It didn't. Instead, I heard the footsteps again, behind me, closer this time, not by distance, by clarity. The crunch of leaves now had weight, defined spacing, controlled timing. I turned around. Nothing there. But the sound didn't stop. It just adjusted. Like it had learned I was paying attention. I started walking again, slower now, trying to maintain control over my pace. The forest responded instantly. My steps synced with something I couldn't see. Every movement I made was mirrored, just slightly off, like a reflection that didn't understand symmetry perfectly. After a while, I reached another clearing. This one had a structure. A post. Tall, wooden, carved with names. Dozens of them. No, not names exactly. Identifiers. Some looked like names. Others looked like dates. Some were just sequences of letters that didn't form anything recognizable, but still felt intentional. At the base of the post was a single sentence carved deeper than the rest. "We are continued." I stepped closer before I realized I was doing it. That was the worst part. My body kept making decisions without asking me. Like familiarity was being overwritten into me in real time. I touched the wood. It was warm. Not recently exposed to sunlight warm. Alive warm. I pulled my hand back immediately. That's when the forest changed direction. Not visually, structurally. The path behind me, if it could still be called that, shifted. The blue markers reoriented. Subtle at first, then obvious. I was no longer walking deeper into the forest. I was walking along it. Parallel. The realization hit slowly, then all at once. I wasn't on a trail. I was inside a boundary, a loop that didn't go forward or backward, just around. That's when the footsteps stopped. For the first time since they began, there was silence behind me. Real silence. And that should have been relief. Instead, it felt like absence of permission. Like something had stepped away because I had reached a stage where it no longer needed to follow. I kept walking anyway, because stopping felt worse. After what might have been another hour, or the same minute repeated differently, I saw the sign again. The one with 1 at the top. Same position, same wood, same carving. But now there was something new beneath it. A second line had been added. Fresh, as if written while I was looking at it. "You are doing well." I felt my stomach drop in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition. Because that wasn't a warning. It was feedback. The forest wasn't trying to scare me anymore. It was evaluating me. I stepped back slowly, and immediately heard footsteps again. Behind me, matching mine perfectly. But now there was something different about them. They weren't following me. They were correcting me. Every time I hesitated, they adjusted. Every time I sped up, they matched, like I was no longer being observed. I was being trained. The realization didn't come with panic, it came with clarity. And clarity was worse, because it meant this had structure, rules, a logic I could potentially fail inside. I started walking faster again, forcing myself to break rhythm, trying to disrupt whatever pattern was forming around me. The forest responded immediately. The markers began to tighten. The space between trees narrowed. The trail became less forgiving. And then I saw it. Ahead, a clearing larger than the others, and in the center, a group of people standing perfectly still. Not walking, not moving, just waiting, facing me. They weren't moving, at least not in any way that matched how I understood movement. They stood in a loose formation across the clearing, spaced evenly without acknowledging each other, all facing in my direction with the same unnatural stillness. Not frozen like statues, not asleep, just paused, as if the concept of continuing had been temporarily suspended. I stopped at the edge of the trees. My first instinct was to count them. 7, then 8, then 7 again when one of them shifted slightly, and my mind refused to agree on whether that counted as movement or correction. The footsteps behind me stopped at the same time I did. That detail mattered more than anything else, because it confirmed something I didn't want to accept yet. Whatever had been following me wasn't independent. It was synchronized. The clearing itself felt different from the rest of the forest. Not in shape or size, but in pressure. Like the air had been compressed into a thinner version of itself. making every sound and thought feel closer than it should. One of the figures stepped forward. A man. Not old, not young. No distinguishing features that my brain could hold on to properly. Every time I tried to focus on his face, it felt like my attention slipped off it, like trying to remember a dream while still inside it. He stopped a few feet from me and spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly enough that I knew the words weren't imagined. "You are at the edge." I didn't respond. My throat felt like it had already decided speech was unnecessary. He continued anyway. "You followed the markers correctly. You did not break the sequence." I glanced back instinctively at the path behind me. The blue markers were still there, but now I noticed something I hadn't before. They weren't marking direction, they were marking states. Each one slightly different in shade, subtle variations in angle that only made sense when seen as part of a progression rather than a path. He noticed where I was looking. "You were never walking through the forest," he said. "You were walking through a record of it." That sentence should not have made sense, but it did, in a way that felt too immediate, like my mind had been waiting for it. He gestured slightly toward the clearing. "This is where the loop closes, or continues, depending on what is left unresolved." I looked at the others again. Now I saw it. Some of them were not fully present, not physically incomplete, but mentally diluted, like their attention was stretched across multiple positions at once, only partially anchored to where they stood. One of them turned their head slightly, just enough for me to recognize something I hadn't wanted to recognize earlier. Familiarity. Not identity, familiarity. My chest tightened. "No," I said quietly, though I wasn't sure what I was denying. The man nodded as if that answer was expected. It always takes longer the first time you remember the pattern. My thoughts started to fragment at that point. Not in panic, in alignment. Pieces of the trail, the rules, the repetition, the footsteps, the sign, all shifting into a structure I can suddenly see from above, rather than inside. The loop wasn't trapping people. It was organizing them. The walkers weren't victims in motion. They were data points. The footsteps behind me returned one final time. But now I understood what they were. Not something following, something confirming. A final synchronization check. The man stepped aside. "The choice is simple," he said. "Continue correctly, or stop incorrectly." I stared at the clearing, at the people, at the system pretending to be a forest. And for the first time since I entered, I stopped trying to escape it. Not because I accepted it, because I finally understood what escaping meant. I took one step forward, then another. The moment my foot crossed into the clearing, the air changed again. Not heavier, final, like a page being turned that would not be returned to. Behind me, the forest stopped feeling like a place and started feeling like memory. The last thing I heard wasn't footsteps. It was the absence of them resolving into silence that felt complete. The man nodded once. "Good," he said, and the loop continued.